It is Wednesday, March 11th, 2026. So today I'm going to chat with you about two of the more interesting resolutions that came up as I was working with the Minnesota DFL Resolutions Committee for my local Senate district. One resolution in education was titled Freedom to Learn, but the text of the resolution was kind of the opposite of freedom. So the original text read, title, Freedom to Learn. The DFL supports a welcoming school environment for all students, regardless of identity, and supports an honest, accurate, and culturally responsive curriculum. The DFL supports updating State Statute 120B.20 to prohibit parents and guardians from opting students out of curriculum based on the representation of protected classes as defined by the Minnesota Human Rights Act. So the issue I took here is that freedom typically means the ability to act in a way that is not controlled by an external force, such as the government. This resolution specifically wanted to prevent parents from opting their children out of school lessons when those lessons covered protected classes of people. In essence, I think that the author of the resolution wants to make sure that students are being taught the whole truth and wants to prevent having kids taken out of class if, for example, Indigenous history, women's rights, history of slavery, or gay rights are taught in school. And while I'd love for this to be a real non-issue, as I think that those are all very important topics that everyone should learn about and should encourage learning about, it does seem directly contradictory to what the term freedom would entail here to mandate compulsory education based on certain topics. So what we did in the resolutions committee is chopped it into two resolutions. We kept the title of the first statement affirming a welcoming school environment for all students, regardless of identity, and supporting an honest, accurate, and culturally responsive curriculum. But then we also titled the second half as its own resolution, according to what the text actually says. And that became Prohibition of Parental Opt-out Based on Protected Classes. We also put in the title of that mentioned statute targeted for amendment, which is Parental Curriculum Review. We did do a number of lookups on other resolutions that mentioned a specific existing law or statute as we went through to essentially get these formatted in such a way that they are succinct. The goal was under 50 words per resolution and that were self-descriptive, where the titles accurately matched what was being asked for. One, or two, since there are two identical statutes on the books for this one, of the more eye-opening statutes that were referenced are titled Contracts with Vendors Who Discriminate Against Israel Prohibited. The resolution was actually very straightforward that came through our caucus process. The resolution read, Repeal Minnesota's anti-boycott laws. Be it resolved that the DFL supports repealing the anti-boycott laws in Minnesota Statutes 3.226 and 16 CO 53. Now, that was the entire original text, and the part in parentheses here we added during our review. We wanted to make sure that if people were voting on this, they didn't have to go to some other website to look it up, so we looked up what those were actually titled and the text in them. Both of them are titled Contracts with Vendors Who Discriminate Against Israel Prohibited. So that got me thinking a bit. Why in the world is there a state law in Minnesota preventing state vendors from working with a specific foreign country? Or in this case, preventing state vendors from working with any business that doesn't do business with a specific foreign country? It's kind of convoluted, and we shouldn't be locking in or preventing discrimination in law against a specific external party. Discrimination should either be applied universally or not at all when we're talking about business agreements with companies that choose to do or not do business with foreign nations. So let's talk about a bit of background about St. Louis Park. We have an outsized Jewish community. Wikipedia puts an estimate of 38% of the Twin Cities metro area Jews as living here in St. Louis Park, just one suburb in a much larger ecosystem. And there's a long-standing history of that migration to St. Louis Park over the last 150 years. Like, it's nothing new. The communities here are extremely established. And that representation is very clear here. There are multiple synagogues in the city, and I've really seen it reflected personally in my fellow committee members in the DFL Resolutions Committee. And let me be very clear, they've all been great to work with. They've been really involved. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that in my entire professional life, I've never met or worked with somebody who both proudly professed their Jewish faith and was also somebody I didn't like to work with or work well with. They've always been very objective people, and I've seen that reflected in the folks I've been working with here on our resolutions committee. I've really seen Judaism reflected in the real world in my experiences through the Jewish people I've known as a rich mix of distinct and important cultural tradition and real-life pragmatism. So I went digging a little bit on this statute, the law that's on the books right now that this one resolution was aiming to repeal, without necessarily naming Israel in the resolution. And luckily, the Minnesota State Office of the Reviser of Statutes website does a great job of letting you look up the history of laws. The law protecting Israel, or making illegal doing business as a state entity with a company that boycotts Israel, was passed 8 years ago in 2017, and all but one of the authors were Republican. Former State Representative Applebaum from Minnetonka was the only DFL co-author, and his religion is marked as Jewish on the Office of the State Reviser website. But the bill passed with votes from both parties, including a couple of folks who I've been looking at the work of recently. My current state senator, Ron Latz, who is also Jewish, and Senator May Quaid from Apple Valley, who is not. She's declared as Lutheran. Latz has served in the state Senate for over 20 years now, since 2003, and he is the Senate committee chair over the Public Safety Committee. From a high-level comb-over of his authored bills from the last 10 years, I can say confidently that he is a career politician. Anyway, at the very least, this was a pretty good exercise in using the modern technological tools I have available to me to do a bit of digging into the background of something that really raised my eyebrows very high. In 2017, I can see a pro-Israel bill being politically popular enough for other folks to glom on and vote for it without looking too much into it. But in 2026, this shit needs to be brought to light and critically reevaluated. Every person who's made it this far in the video needs to understand we are well past the point where you need to separate Judaism from Israel. Most Americans do not support the actions of the American federal government in Iran right now, and fewer will as the war drags on and gas and other prices skyrocket. I do believe that it's the same way with most Jews not supporting the actions of the Israeli government, whether that is essentially taking a co-authoring role in attacking Iran or the 50-plus year that Israel has as a perpetuator of Palestinian apartheid. And now both governments are in cahoots. They're sowing death, chaos, and disorder across the Middle East for the benefit only of those who profit from war, and at the expense specifically of the American and Israeli citizens. Anyway, I'll let you know how the repeal the anti-boycott statutes go when we count the votes on the resolutions after the convention. I feel like I have at least done a service in making sure that what that resolution actually is doing is highly visible to anyone who reads it. I'm concerned that most people aren't going to read in depth into the history of it as I have, but again, we'll see. I think one of the benefits of volunteering where I'm volunteering is that I can truly and transparently see just how much support it has given the what I believe is fair wording that we're leaving it with.